Okay, what that? Good morning, members. So welcome to the meeting on Monday, the 11th of July, at 10 o'clock. So we start off. Apologies for absence, please, Chris.
Apologies received from Councillor Ellsbury, Hussey, Melbourne, Wright, Morgan, Mrs Sarah Watkins and DCF Paul Prendergast.
Right, thank you ever so much. I won't do a roll call because we can see who's here now and wherever. We also do the roll call when we're all on Teams, whatever. So number 3 in the agenda, declarations of interest. Members of the Fire and Rescue Authority reminded of their personal responsibility to declare both orally and in writing any personal prejudicial interest in respect of matters contained in this agenda in accordance with the provisions of the Local Government Act 2000. The Fire and Rescue Authority standing orders and members code. Are there any declarations of interest, please? Steve?
Yeah, I've got a declared interest in a new development.
Sue? Okay.
Chair,
Can officers, please?
Yeah, on behalf of the officers, can I declare an interest in agenda items 8.2 and 8.4?
Thank you. Are they prejudicial or personal?
Both.
Both, okay, yep.
And myself, Chair, I'd like to declare interest in agenda item 8.3, personal.
Okay, thank you. Debbie?
Yeah, 8.2 and
Yeah,
4 on behalf.
okay, yeah.
Well,
You're doing it from all the officers. No, because normally if they
Okay.
just do it, they should do it themselves.
Okay,
Okay? That's the way it should be done.
okay, they can speak for themselves, Chair, if they want.
Yeah, okay.
Everyone ready?
Okay, thank you for that. So I want to chairman's announcements. Quite a long stuff to say here. So first of all, I'd like to welcome members of the first full meeting of the South Wales Fire and Rescue Authority for the municipal year 22-23. I especially like to welcome our newest members from Jen Paula Ford, Martin Hughes, and a new member from Cardiff, Bethan Proctor. I would also like, along with several of the members, had the pleasure to attend the latest recruits passing out parade on the 16th of June 2022. I'm going to be honest, it was a brilliant day, and I'd recommend all members, when we have passing out parades, please go to them because it is a wonderful event at Cardiff Gate. It was nice to see the firefighters with all they do their skills in front of their family and friends. Brilliant. The National Firefighters Service of Remembrance will take place on Sunday, the 4th of September in London. This is a very, very important event in the fire service calendar. I will be attending to represent the service, and I would like names of 2 members who would like to attend with myself and senior officers on this day. This is, I see Maureen there, she's been to it before. I think, Steve, no, you haven't been.
No,
It's an absolutely brilliant day in London where we meet in the old church in St. Bartholomew's just up there. And then we have a service there from all the firefighters authorities in the United Kingdom. And then we march then from there through the streets of London, past St. Paul's Cathedral to the Firefighters Memorial at the side of St. Paul's Cathedral. It is absolutely a wonderful event. So there's spaces in the car for 2 fire authority members if they want to come. It's an early start, mind.
But if nobody else wants to go, but if because I've been once, if you.
Yeah, Pam.
Pam Craig against, I would move Steve to that.
Yeah, okay, right, yeah. Fire authority members took an induction on Tuesday, the 5th of July. I'm sorry I wasn't able to attend this meeting because I got the meeting all day with the police in my area. Members have received electronic copies of the members' handbook, PowerPoint slides, and I hope to get e-learning vision of induction carried out soon. I'd like to remind members of the importance of the attendance of fire authority meetings and committees to ensure the commitment is met by the requirements set out by the Independent Remuneration Panel for Wales. And this next item is quite important to members. Members are reminded that emails issued regarding operational incidents are for Fire and Rescue Authority members' information only. They should not be circulated to other members of your own authority. This has happened in the past, and it is total protocol is not there at all. They should not be receiving these emails. So I will advise when you get an email from control to say something has seriously happened in your area, it's only for your eyes, the chair and the deputy chair, and no one else, because it caused a lot of problems back a few months ago. Work is scheduled in the conference room later this week. It's to improve the acoustics in the room and the air handling system. Yes, I'm so glad that's been sorted because it's like an icebox in there sometimes. Visio conferencing facilities will also be fitted to allow us to move back in the main conference hall for authority meetings. Members' expenses are currently submitted on pay and performs and will cease from August the 1st to move to a core HR payroll system. Appropriate training and guides are provided after the H and Colleagues Committee meeting and the FPM meeting later this month. So you wanted to say something on announcements?
I would just like to thank the fire brigade. Last Wednesday in Tretton in my ward, I had a quarry death and another young teenager rescued. I know the circumstances of what's all witnessed. Friday, I had a house fire in a row. You've saved one house, the middle house had gone, but you also saved the other three. I was there in attendance and I was watching how professional you were and how courageous, because there was one fire brigade officer on a ladder going through the window with a hose, and then there's explosions downstairs. So thank you from the bottom of my heart, from my community, for everything you've done last week.
Okay, and my thanks as well, my thanks as well to the crew, all crews involved. You to say something else?
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And we'll make sure your comments, observations and your kind words are fed back to the crews. Because I know certainly the incident in the midweek was very tragic, and we've wrapped the full support around our operational crews following that tragic incident as well. So we will make sure your comments, observations and kind words are fed back. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will also say something as well, pass my thanks on to the crew from Ponty Station for saving a gentleman's life. 3 weeks ago, he had a cardiac arrest. He waited for the ambulance, but our crews sorted that out. I know you're aware of it, so Councillor Steve Powderhill, who represents the Treforest ward, contacted me and he wanted to pass his thanks to you and all the staff involved. Fantastic, he said.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you ever so much. So we go on to the next item on the agenda, which are the meetings on page 5. Are we correct? Can we have a move in a second, please?
Second.
Okay, thank you ever so much. Any matters arising? No. On page 19, the AGM, any matters arising? Have a move in a second, please.
No.
Okay, thank you. Page 29, the local pension bond. Need some advice on this, please, because the only person there is myself, and there's no one else to vote these minutes, but they are correct. These minutes are correct. So can we, are you agreeing that we accept these minutes? I can assure they are correct. Okay, thank you ever so much.
Chair, they were approved in the latest local pension.
Right.
Last Monday.
That's okay, thank you ever so much for that. On page 35, the minutes of the Finance, Asset and Performance Management Scrutiny meeting. Glenn, you were at that meeting, are you okay with those, Glenn?
Second out.
Yep, okay, thank you. And the minutes of the HR committee. Yep. Yeah, happy with those, yeah?
Yeah, seconded, yeah.
Right, thank you ever so much. And then we're on the Finance and Audit and Performance Management Committee. Steve?
Move that, yeah.
I'll second that.
Thank you ever so much. The next item on the agenda is the forward working programme, you right?
Yeah, sorry, it's we can brought the forward work programme from the end of the agenda forward because officers won't be present in the room at the end of the agenda. So the forward work programme just sets out the proposed reports which will be brought to the Fire Authority for this meeting and the remainder of the municipal year. So there's a full plan set out, and obviously as and when there's need for additional reports, they'll be added to just set up the work programme as is.
I notice on page 51, look at the acquisition of land for New Win.
Sorry, come back to that.
Right,
one.
okay, go on.
Agenda item 6, yeah, the actions then.
Yep, update action, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, so any queries on the forward work programme? Okay, so agenda item 6 on page 51 is the update on actions. I'll take the first two before handing over to ACO Reid to do an update on pensions. The acquisition of land from minute 2021-32, the acquisition of land at New Inn. For members' awareness, for those that haven't been on the Fire Authority previously, we were looking to acquire a parcel of land to hopefully do a new development and build a new site at New Inn. We've been in negotiations with the owner of the land for some time. We undertook initial investigations, site surveys, intrusive investigations on the land to make sure it was fit for purpose and there was no issues with the land, which all came back clear. So we were ready to make a formal offer, but unfortunately the vendors of the site have just gone quiet on us and they made no communication back to us at all. We made several attempts to contact them. Members of my team and the property team, the chief fire officer has written to them. We've used agents on our behalf to contact them, but we've had no response back from them whatsoever. And this is dragged on for several months now. So we've basically started to look at alternative courses of action. The condition of our existing New Inn site, it's a very old station. There's work needed on that site. So we started to do initial surveys to look at design, structural design and sort of layout plans for that site as an alternative proposal. So it looks, whilst we'll continue to keep it open as an option for this other piece of land, should the vendors come back to us, I think our preferred option now would be to push ahead and look for a redevelopment on our existing site, which makes it a bit more difficult for because it would ideally be easier if we were to build a new station on a new site and then move completely to occupy it. Whereas now we'll obviously have to do sort of work around proposals if we are to sort of demolish the existing site and build where we are. But that's the latest position on that.
That would incur extra costs for us then, wouldn't it? Because we're going to reallocate.
Yes. Obviously, we'd have to look for temporary accommodation when we build the new site. But say that they'll all be done as part of the project plan, and more information should we go down that route now and sort of go further in terms of drawing up a full tender, to go out to tender to do a full construction on that site. We'll come back long before that. This isn't going to happen within the next couple of weeks, so we'll obviously keep members updated on that one. But I think in terms of the acquisition of that piece of land, now I think that's going to be only a fallback option should they come back to us.
It does seem odd, doesn't it, after all the work has been done, that they're not coming back to you? I mean, do they actually own the land and perhaps?
So yeah, they do own the land. I think they're a very large company. I think they do this. They land bank sites that they've got. Whether they hold an offer for a better offer or whether there's internal mechanisms that seem to be afoot here. We've had one communication that says that they may be in the middle of a takeover as a company, so they've been bought out. So perhaps that's caused some of the issues. But for us as a fire authority, what we don't want is to delay hoping for the site.
Yeah.
With the condition of the building getting worse, and then 6 months down the line, we'd only then be starting to draw up designs. So we're taking initial actions to sort of look to develop our existing site. That would probably be the preferred option going forward.
Yeah, the same thing happened when we were looking at the site on the 8470 in Pontypridd.
Yeah.
Pontypridd station. We were months. So in the end, just for the new members, we decided to invest in Pontypridd station to upgrade Pontypridd. Although it's not in Pontypridd, it's in Treforest. It's quite confusing. But I think the money spent at Pontypridd station has been well worth, and the crews are really happy with that. So it's like deja vu again, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, Steve.
Yeah, just to say that particular area, there's a lot of developments going on from there down. So I'm wondering whether they're just holding out for more money, particularly at that. But the main question I can ask is the old site in New Inn is such a large site, and it does need a fair bit of work, doesn't it? So
It's the conditions. It's in decay. I think it's fair to say that the crews have been wonderful, accommodating sort of temporary measures, temporary works that we do just to keep it in as fit for purpose as we can, but it is desperately in need of a full refurbishment, full reconstruction.
Okay, so when I get a full report, then we'll go to Steve's committee then, so they can discuss it.
Yeah, this is part of the capital programme built in, so the finance committee will be briefed in terms of, you know, when we start in to make money and make expenditure against it, which we already will in terms of design fees. But obviously, anything, you know, the costs envisaged for a tender of that size construction will have to come back to the fire authority for approval before we get there.
Okay, thanks, Doug. Geraint. Anything else? Debbie?
Yeah, just at your request, Area Manager Gary Davis is arranging a meeting for yourself and the local councillors if they wish to do so, to have a look at the new in station.
Yeah, I would appreciate that much to see both.
So that's in hand, and when the secretariat will make that appointment.
Yeah, because we've done the same thing when we Pontypridd 2 and myself met with crews, and when we got there, we actually saw what needed to be done. And yeah, we were bombarded with loads, laughing, with loads of questions and quite an angry staff because it hadn't been developed. So I think the same thing can happen in Newman, and we just want to make sure the staff's health and well-being are second to none for them. And I think it's a way forward of upgrading the station.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sole check.
Yeah.
Next one on that as well, then, Claire, was the proposed new terms of reference for the scrutiny committee. Obviously, following the AGM, the proposal for the reform of the scrutiny group was changed, so that was approved. So it'll just be a case of now getting the updated terms of reference taken through that scrutiny group, and then that'll be reported back to the fire authority when we do the review of the constitutional documents as well. So I'll close that one off as an action going forward. So
Alison?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Morning, members. So the next two actions relate to firefighter pensions and provide an update on where we are in terms of progressing pension statements for people who are due to retire. Some of you will have heard of the McLeod judgment, and it related to firefighter pensions, but more broadly public sector pensions. So as a service back last July, Fire Authority made a decision to implement Category 1 cases, and Category 1 cases are those individuals who are retiring, so not individuals who have retired, but anyone wishing to retire, any firefighter will be offered 2 pension benefit statements in terms of their prospective remedy offer, I suppose. And what that means is they will be given an option to have a pension based on where they should have been prior to the change back in 2011, when all pension schemes were reformed. So essentially what we're offering is 2 retirement estimate options, one based on where they are now in terms of the transition into a newer pension scheme, and one that puts them back into their old pension scheme, which is where they would have been if the remedy and the discrimination hadn't happened. So very complex, but it does allow our firefighters to go out with 2 options. So we're essentially correcting the age discrimination that was stated in the court to have happened. So that's the first bit. So we are continuing to offer 2 pension statements to anyone wishing to retire. And then the second update is around the resourcing. So we've allocated resourcing, so internal resources to ensure that we can, so that we are shored up to progress this work. And we are working also on the background work to look at the Category 2 cases. So those are the cases where people have retired. So for the moment, we're only progressing cases where they are due to retire, but those who have retired aren't yet in scope for remedy. The other thing that we are doing is we're putting some work into the comms and engagement, so that we are keeping people updated on where we are in terms of implementing the remedy solution. And we're working with GAD, so the Government Actuaries Department, on launching a new calculator so that people can log in, look at what the 2 offers look like, and that means correcting the age discrimination. So there's a lot of work going into member communications and illustrations. We're looking to launch the GAD model in the next 4 weeks. So a lot of groundwork to provide the comms to our firefighters, but conscious that this is a broader piece of work around public sector pensions. So that's where we are.
I think, thank you, Alison, because I know what pensions are like. It's our staff's future that I look at it. I think it's a very important part of being a member of the fire authority is the pensions for our firefighters, 100%. So yes, Alison, yeah.
Yeah, there is one other update, which is on the living wage foundation accreditation. Just to confirm, as the update says, we are now an accredited living wage employer. And the next part of the process is to look at our contracts. So to review all our contracts to see whether we are compliant from a contractual perspective. So we're working with our procurement team and Garrett's team to look at those contracts we have in place to see whether they meet the requirements for us to work with our contractors on that.
So Alison, thank you so much. Much appreciated for both of you for that. So we're on to the next item on the agenda on page 5971. I believe this is you, Chief.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, morning, members. The paper and the appendices which are attached to really to bring newer members to the Fire Authority up to speed and to give a bit of a history of where we've been with the journey over the last 2 decades around the ambition to broaden the role for firefighters across Wales. It's been a national conversation that's gone on across the UK, and it's stalled and stuttered at every juncture and hurdle, if truth be known. Early 2020-ish, Welsh Government pinned their colours to the mast and said, actually, their ambition for firefighters in Wales is that they would assist our NHS colleagues and go to medical calls, not instead of, but with our ambulance colleagues as well. I'll take members through each of the appendices. I won't go through them page by page, but it'll give a bit of a history around that. So a broadening role working group was established. Debbie, as was our representative on there, as was other representatives from the other 2 fire and rescue services in Wales, Welsh Ambulance Service, NHS Wales, and Welsh Government officials as well. And the purpose behind the working group was to define that if fire could assist our NHS colleagues, in what purpose and what guise would that look like? So in 2015, we ran a trial for 22 months where we had 11 of our fire stations responding to cardiac arrest calls, someone who was unconscious, someone with a severe bleed, or someone that was choking in our communities. Over that period of time, we attended just short of about 250 operational incidents across our community with the stations that were taking part in a trial. The trial was supported by the Fire Brigades Union as the main representative body and trade union for firefighters across the UK and particularly here. So Dewi, who was really close to that trial, sat on that working group with us to look to coach others. What could it look like of this broadening of the role? And the essence we come back to is 3 elements where NHS colleagues across Wales felt that we could assist. And that was going to cardiac arrest calls, going to uninjured fallers within the home, and then continuing to do with the prevention work that we do. So when our firefighters go to a home to do a home safety check, it's now called home safety, there is other things that they look out for as well. So you not only do a fire safety risk assessment within the home for the individual, but they've been trained to recognise signs of domestic abuse and sexual violence, human trafficking. Would they carry out a falls assessment, and we've got an occupational therapist, and we've got falls referral pathways back into our NHS colleagues and our health boards as well. So it's about building on that. So those discussions have gone on. The working group made their recommendations, and that's how it's probably been. So the Deputy Minister, on the back of the recommendations of the working group, established her fire advisor to conduct a review, which is an appendix 2, which I'll come to in time, to do a review to say that if the Welsh Fire and Rescue Services embarked on this broadening the role, would the additional work that they're doing hinder our core and statutory duties or not? And we can come on to some of the recommendations that the Deputy Minister of the Welsh Government's Fire Advisor has made, and there was four recommendations that come from that as well. So I think if I take members through each of the appendices, not in detail, as I said, but it allows a bit of a chronology of where we are, where we've been to where we are today. So bear with me because my screen's gone a little bit. Right, so don't trust technology.
No.
You can work up for your engine.
I mean,
What page are we on here? On the cabinet?
okay.
So I've just got one behind.
Save.
When you're here, if you want.
It's okay. I'm on it. I'm organised on your. So if we have a look at Appendix 1, which was the Deputy Minister statement that was made earlier this year. Under the national framework, the minister responsible for fire needs to make a statement every 2 years. This statement really reflects the work that we've done as a fire and rescue service throughout the COVID pandemic. The work that we were doing with and working through others. But members can see at the bottom of it, there is reference there that the fire and rescue services across Wales have the potential and the scope to assist our NHS colleagues. But that needs to be done in social partnership and to be working with our representative unions and particularly the fire brigades union on that. Then if we look at the Appendix 2, which is the fire advisor's thematic review, it's the larger of the documents. There's only a couple of things I'm gonna pick out from here. So top of page 8, there's some headline findings there, which the fire advisor came to us. Page 8 of the report. Sorry, I don't know what it is in the budget.
It's, you get different numbers too.
Yeah.
76.
76?
Yeah.
Yeah, 76, yeah, so. Yeah, so top of page 76 in your bundle, but in the report, it's top of page 8, there's some headline findings there. So it further supports that there is scope for fire and rescue services to be assisting our NHS colleagues with certain medical calls, as what was described within the working group. The report that the fire advisor identifies that there is more capacity within the firefighter shift system between 10 o'clock in the evening to 7 o'clock in the night. And that is predominantly because people are in bed, in sleep and safe. It goes on to say then that any falls prevention activity would generally take place in the day, as does our current fire risk reduction activities as well. So all our school visits, home safety, etc., generally go on within the day as well. There is then a reference in there around some shift changes that may need to take place in the eyes and the view of the fire advisor as well. And he alludes within his report that there is a potential for risk and fatigue because of the additional work that's ongoing within taking on that broader role. And then if I could jump members to the end of that report, which is really, sorry, so it's in your bundle, it's top of page 94, top of page 94 in your bundle. And it's end of the there's 4 recommendations that the Welsh Government's fire advisor made to the Deputy Minister. And that was for fire authorities to review the existing shift systems which operate within the individual authorities. To review recommendation 2 then to review the existing shift pattern against some health and safety guidance, which is HSG 256. And then there's a bit around on recommendation 3 around conducting a training analysis, exercising and risk reduction activity. So basically, if we embark on this broadening the role, that doesn't compromise our ability to carry out our core and statutory functions, and for our firefighters to understand the risk they got in that area, and for them to maintain their skills and competence through training and exercising as well. And then recommendation 4 was around some very specific technical aspect around how we code what activities our firefighters do as well. So that was the appendix 2. If we have a look at appendix 3, that was a statement made by the Deputy Minister in December 2021, which reinforces their ambition for firefighters across Wales to take on a broader role across their communities. This was a statement that launched the and made public their fire advisors previous report, which we've just been through as well. So that bit re-emphasises the report in which we've just been through. Interesting bit on that is if you look on bottom or midway down page 96, I think it is in your bundle, it talks there around the changes to current working practices may be necessary, and that is something that matters for fire and rescue authorities and not Welsh Government, and that's the Deputy Minister's statement in that. So on the back of the communication, the work that's ongoing, discussions that I have with Welsh Government officials on a regular basis, and then the Welsh Government Fire Advisors thematic review coming out, on Appendix 4, the action that I took was to implement a efficiency and effectiveness working group to look at our existing working practices, and are they suitable and sufficient, and do they compromise any health, safety and well-being issues across the service. The working group that I established is chaired by an experienced operational manager, and then is representatives then from stations at a command level, supervisory level. There's a training representative, and there's the workforce representative through the trade unions with the Fire Brigades Union, health and safety representative, and an occupational health representative as well. So I established that group in February 2022 with, as you can imagine, the detailed work that they need to work through for final completion of their recommendations in autumn 2022. So it's been a bit of a journey. We still are on a journey, I would say. The ambitions from Welsh Government are still there. However, the focus of more recent times, I would say, are focusing on shift changes and not the enhancement of the service that we can deliver to our communities at the end. And I'm also aware that following the Fire Brigades Union conference earlier this year in the spring, that there was a resolution from a couple of fire services that have been put forward, which was passed, that they support the broadening the role for firefighters to respond to cardiac arrest and medical calls, but they do not support firefighters stepping into the arena of uninjured fallers. And the reasons why that is because the volume and the magnitude, the numbers of calls that goes on across our communities, then would have the potential maybe to compromise our core statutory functions, competence, and the like as well. So it's very confusing. It is. I say I've been involved in this for a decade, and we get close to the line and then we retract a bit. The disappointing bit for me is the fact there seems to be an unhealthy focus on the shift pattern and not the ability to save lives and make a difference to our communities. Thanks, Jim.
Steve?
I've got 6 if you want. You might have covered some of this. More money being put into the NHS than ever before. And the reason I say that leads on to my next question. There's been no increase in pay for the fire service to take on these extra roles. The third thing is, with the negative publicity from the NHS, that could affect us as a service. And 4, additional work means that the staff going to be medics, but I think you touched on that more on toward the end. And during COVID, all the extra additional work we've done with the NHS ambulance service, we're doing that anyway. They're asking us to do even more with them, do they want them to do firefighting? A six, what do we do if we get a major incident, whether it be terrorism or anything like that? How do we prioritize that?
Kate, do you want to explain?
Firstly, can I just comment that it's really good to hear your approach of wanting to do this in social partnerships. So I just really wanted to note that as something very positive. I wanted to ask to what extent you agree with the findings of the advisor's thematic review, but also I'm hearing from you some real potential for opportunity around enhancement of service. So there's a question just from me to spell out a little bit more for us what you see as the risks and the opportunities within this, building on what you were saying about an unhealthy focus on shift change, but perhaps there is some potential that we're missing here around enhancement of service and how we get from that from this to that.
Yeah.
Only one question. On the 3 reports, I couldn't see the name of the fire advisor to the deputy minister. I didn't know if you knew who it was. So I think that we said it was an ex-firefighter, but I couldn't see the name.
The fire advisor's name,
Yeah.
or Dan Stevens.
I think he used to be the chief of Merseyside.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah,
It actually says that.
Merseyside should be the different.
So yeah, was he the chief up there when they had all the industrial action? No, serious
Yeah,
question.
no, that's a good question.
Anybody's phone ringing?
Mine.
Who do you want to answer?
Okay.
Start off with Ian's first.
No, the fire advisor is Dan Stevens. He was previously in Merseyside, and he did go to Australia for a short time as well, and then come back and got appointed to the fire advisor. I think it would be fair to say that he did work in Merseyside when there was industrial unrest. I guess most people who did work in Merseyside perhaps worked there when there was industrial unrest. Yeah, I can't say that. You can, yes, yeah. So yeah, if I could pick up Councillor Evans's first. So to talk about the NHS and the payment for this. There's always been a long held knowledge that for firefighters to take on additional responsibilities and to have a different job description and role map, then that would come with additional remuneration. So where that remuneration would come from has never been sort of tackled, I think, because we've never got round, and it probably links a little bit to Councillor Carr's comments and observations we'll come to, is we've never got round the table to negotiate what this looks like. Now, I think the only way to get to firefighters doing the roles that the Welsh Government have the ambition for us to do is in a negotiated way. So, we talk around working, we're pleased to work in Wales in a social partnership way. It is a right and proper way to do that. So you take your workforce with you for the changes that you want to make. But we've never got round the table to negotiate what does that look like. So even if we want to change a shift pattern, as the fire advisor suggests within his review, that would need to be done in a negotiated way. And unless the authority as the employer would like to embark on a P&O type approach where we do a unilateral which is so to get to the end needs a negotiated way. To get to shift changes needs a negotiated way to go forward. So my long held belief is this is a package of reform, and you negotiate a package of reform with the appropriate trade unions going forward. And that includes the changes that we would want to see as a fire authority, the changes that Welsh Government would want to see as a government. And that would need to be agreed with the representative bodies representing firefighters across Wales. And then that will all come out as a percentage figure. And then you determine whether that is affordable at the end of that. Now, where the money comes from, Councillor Evans, I don't really know. Because if this is working for the NHS, then we are funded in a different way by our constituent authorities and our home authorities as well. But it is, you know, everyone knows that it would need to come with additional remuneration. What that percentage is, I really don't know. Now, Scotland got really close to a deal a couple of years ago, but because they never clearly defined what it was they wanted firefighters in Scotland to do, they never got the deal over the line, which is why we approached it with the working group that Debbie was sitting on to make sure that we defined what it is that we wanted our firefighters to do. And then picking up your other comments and observations around skills and competence. The skills and competence that our firefighters across South Wales have got today are suitable and sufficient and probably over for what we'd want them to go to, and if that was cardiac arrest calls. So they've already got that skill set as well. So we're not looking for them to become paramedics because that's a 3-year degree course. They've got through their immediate trauma course qualifications that we already provide them. They've got the skills, knowledge, kit and equipment that they would need to be able to go to that. And that's what allowed us to do the trials in 2015, where we learned a lot from as well. In relation to a conflict, would we be on an incident or not? We've got 47 stations, we've got 60 fire engines. When we carried out the trials in 2015 for 22 months, we never had one conflict of a crew being on a medical call when a core statutory function call come in. And we are quite adept at moving our resources around on a day-by-day basis anyway to suit and meet the risk that we have that occurs daily. So I don't see that as that would compromise what we would want to do either. And you're right as well, throughout the COVID pandemic and you know the help and support that we provide in our NHS and WAS colleagues, we had over 100, 200 volunteers to go and work with WAS to drive ambulances throughout the COVID pandemic as well. So the ambition and the will across our staff is there to assist our communities as well. Is that okay? Is that okay?
Yeah. Yeah, the only thing part I wanted to come back in on, when you say there's a major incident and you can alter your resources, if it's a terrorist incident, that could be wide reaching. So that would be, you know, a wider struggle, wouldn't it, surely?
Yeah, and we'd always fluctuate in our resources with demand as well. So we never have a static demand. So, you know, some hours we're busier than other hours, and we flex and grow with that. And we you know, through our joint control staff, they move resources across the area. And then we've also got the mutual aid bit as well. If we did need support from other services, we've got neighbouring surrounding services that would be able to provide that mutual aid and support.
Yes, which is all as we can call it Hereford and Worcester.
Yeah, I understand that, but
you know,
I just think we didn't want to be stretched further than we can be, you know, stretched anymore.
hang on, if you've answered yes,
So if I can come back to Councillor Carr's comments and observations as well. So yeah, for me, it's about working in social partnership, and it's about not taking the eye off the prize, and that's about being able to deliver better services to our communities and save more lives going forward. And I know we are well structured and well represented across our communities. We've got the right people in the right place with the right skills to be able to do more, but we need to work together, and we need to work with our trade unions to be able to do that, to get to a negotiated settlement right at the end, so the public see a better service. And that's my ambition and my desire, to be honest with you. Do I agree with the findings within the fire advisors review? I wouldn't say totally, no. I'm not convinced that a shift change is required, but I haven't seen the outcome of that piece of work that I've set up with the working group as yet. So it would be a little bit presumptuous of me to sit and say yes or no. I'll be able to report back fully in the autumn, and we move into the winter when that work concludes. But what I would say, from the experience that we had with the trials that we run in 2015, we didn't do that with a shift change, and we still saved lives. So that's I'm not prejudging anything that comes out. So it is about delivering a better service. But like I said, it needs to be negotiated, you know, from start to finish. Okay.
yeah.
I was going to say, I agree with everything that you said. You did. The staff have always met any challenge. The one thing that it doesn't say in the report, the 400 plus staff that you had assisting the NHS with the vaccinations and ambulance driving, but I believe we're doing it in their own time, not whilst they were on duty. And that isn't clear in the report. It almost reads in the report as if they were doing it whilst they were on duty. But I agree, till you get the findings from your working group. I don't think we could make an educated comment, let alone you.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
And on that point, members, I received a letter on the weekend from the Deputy Minister. I won't read it all out to you, I won't read it out much, but virtually saying that Deputy Minister wanted me to agree to all this by the end of August. But I'm sorry, I can't agree to any of this until I see the review, what Hugh put out. And I'm the same of opinion as Hugh. This has got to be negotiated with the trade unions. It's a must, you know. I agree with most of it. Yes, we need to save lives instead of heart attacks and whatever. Nobody would more heart attacks than me, you know. I've had 3, no, I've had 4, haven't I, Hugh? 4,
Yeah.
I've had 4, yes, 4 like that, yes. So I know what it's like to have a heart attack or waiting for an ambulance to come to see you. But I believe that I'd like Hugh to arrange a meeting for myself and my deputy to meet with the FBU representatives for South Wales in the area to discuss this so we as elected members can find their views on what their thoughts are on this. And also if you could get in contact with the 2 other fire services as well, we could have a kind of meeting, the 3 services together, so we can talk this through. For the new members, what we had a couple of years ago, we set up the National Issues Committee, where the 3 fire services met on a quarterly basis in Llandrindod Wells. That was very, very good. It was working well. We collaborated on quite a lot of things, and I think the National Issues Committee should start looking at this again, Hugh. And I strongly believe. Yeah, I believe change needs to happen. But change is to be done in a constructive way for the benefit of everybody, not just a few. And that's my own personal view on it. And I will be putting my views to the minister in a letter once I've met with the unions and whatever. But I say it to you, I don't like being told a deadline when I have got to reply to a letter. I really do not like that, and as I'm recording for the minister to hear me saying that. I'm sorry to say it, but I do not like being told that whatsoever. Okay. Anybody else want to say anything on this report?
I'd like to support that suggestion, Chair. It's
Yeah.
very appropriate action and circumstances.
Yeah, thank you ever so much.
I'll take that on.
I take that on, yes. Thank you ever so much. Appreciate it, but thank you. So the recommendations are the members note the work of the finance. Oh, I have the wrong one, do you? I got the wrong one. See, once you pass the 60, it's a big poor bit bigger sometimes. So
You're in the right order now.
I am in the right order, apparently, yes.
59.
Yeah. I moved over a page. Yeah.
It's heart attacks and not brain attacks.
I like that.
Thank you ever so
He
much.
used to me, don't worry.
I get enough of you of having it in the council chamber. So we go on to the next item on the. Well, I'll be going, yeah. So the members have acknowledged the thematic review of the chief fire and rescue advisor of the Wales Fire and Service Wales capacity, head the worker rights for broadening the role of firefighters in Wales. Members note the report of the chief fire officer and the rescue recommendations on action, and the chief fire officer commissioned a working group under the governance of the service operational coordination group, and members note the update to the progress of the service. Everybody's in agreement with that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're on to page 101 now. So, you're right.
Thank you, Chair. I won't go into too much of the detail of this report. This is the annual report of the work of the Finance Audit and Performance Management Committee and the FAPM Scrutiny Group as well as them. This is coming to this meeting now. They normally go to the end of the municipal year, the Fire Authority, but as there was some workload outstanding for both the Scrutiny Group and the FAPM Committee, it was necessary for them to have meetings in April. There's two appendices to the report which set out the work that was undertaken by by the committee and the group throughout the year. On paragraph 5.1 to the first the report, sorry, on page 111, it sets out areas of work still to be undertaken. Those were the pieces of work that were actually undertaken in that April meeting, so they've all been bottomed off as well, so they are still outstanding. Other than that, obviously it sets out the detail of the work that the FAPM committee did, covering financial and policy areas, and the scrutiny group then looking at the medium-term financial strategy, budget setting, and asset management strategies, and obviously the proposals for reform in the scrutiny group. I'll pause at that point. I'll give Steve the opportunity as chair of FAPM if he wants to add in anything to that.
No, it's just, it's a very interesting committee. There's a lot of challenge regarding anything that happens within the service financially or any policies. So anybody that sits on the committee will see that. But yeah, we just covered a lot of areas and we look into a lot of scrutiny parts of it as well.
Happy to take any further questions.
No, I'll move it then.
It's a recommendation.
Yeah. I've lost my bit of paper on my recommendations. Sorry about that. Recommendation the members note the work undertaken by the Finance and Audit Performance Management Committee and Finance and Asset Performance Scrutiny Committee during the municipal year. And I would like to put my thanks to Steve for the sterling work that he has done on scrutinising the finances of this authority. Very, very much so.
Yeah.
So we go to the next one now. You can take this, Geraint,
Yeah, I'll start off with this one.
on 7.3.
Yeah, I'll just do a sort of brief intro for this before handing over to ACF and Debbie Rose to go into the more detail on the strategic performance indicators. The first part of the report, probably if you take members to page 121, on page 121, 2.1 there, it sets out our 8 strategic themes. So they're the themes that are built into our corporate planning framework. And then on page 123, it sort of gives a diagram showing how many actions are in place against each one of those and progress against each one of those themes. The rest of that part of the report then obviously gives a lot of detail on the progress against each of those strategic themes and some of the work that's gone on in Q4 of the year in sort of making progress and achievement in our overall aims. I'll pause at that point to see if members want to give any questions around the details set out in that part. Or hand it over to Barry to take the performance indicators.
The only question I would ask on page 132, working with public service boards, the criteria changing with the public service board, and how aren't they? Are we going to manage with that?
Yes, so that our landscape for public service boards changing. So we September back end of last year, the former Gwent area, which were the 5 local authorities of Monmouthshire, Newport, Blind Gwent, Torvine and Capri, made a decision to combine. So they've moved into a single public service board. The ambition in the Cwmtaf area as well, so that matches the Aneurin Bevan Health Board area. In the Bregend area as well, in Cwmtaf, there's a Cwmtaf PSB, which is a combined PSB between Rhondda Cynon Taf and Merthyr. Bregend will be joining that, so that will become co-terminus with the Health Board as well. So the landscape is changing. The focus and the within the PSBs has changed over that period of time, and I think that shows the maturity around the ability to work collaboratively and not just look at things on a geographical map. So I think over the period of time we've been working with the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act, I've seen a marked change within the professional relationships across the PSBs and an ability to work together on some of the biggest ticket items that we need to come together on that you cannot solve as a single PSB member, really.
Yeah. I'm really glad that they have joined into one, because you were attending 10
That was my next.
different PSBs, and I can see you putting your hair. You haven't got a chair like me now, but it's but no, I'm so glad they've done that, because it benefits everybody. Yeah.
If there's no further questions, I'll pass
Debbie?
it to Debbie.
Yeah, morning members, thank you, Chair. Thanks, Gary. Okay, if I'll take you briefly through the report before I start. The 7 strategic indicators that we report on, we'll show the graphs for each of them. So they are the 7 indicators that Welsh Government have agreed that we as a service and the other 2 fire and rescue services report on an annual basis on the performance of the service. So this is the annual report, the end of year report. But actually as a service, I chair a meeting with colleagues from Community Safety, Business Fire Safety and the Operations Department that we review our ongoing performance on a quarterly basis as a service. We're actually putting the interventions to understand what's happening in relation to our incident types, the numbers we're attending, and things we can do to mitigate and control those, and how we respond to our community safety messaging in our communities for any changes in the types of incident we're attending. So that's just an overview of what those strategic indicators are. Okay. So when I go to page 142, I'll just pick out some key points really. As a service, we've obviously modified our approach to home safety checks, as we term them, enhanced home fire safety checks. So we're not only looking at when we go into somebody's home about giving them advice on fire, but if we believe there's a carbon monoxide risk, we've got the ability now through funding through Welsh Government to fit carbon monoxide detectors. We may give them leaflets on smoking cessation if we find they're smokers. Falls prevention. We actually don't do anything, but we've got the ability through partnership approach in each of the local authorities to come back, refer somebody that may be a vulnerable person, elderly person at risk of a fall, and we may have seen a particular area of risk in the home. We can refer that to the falls team in the local authority area where we've got those partnerships. So we're starting to build, as Hugh just sort of highlighted, how we go broader than just dealing with fire. We deal with other risks in the community as well, and through other awareness training that we have through our crews. If there's any other vulnerabilities, again through a partnership approach, we signpost it to the relevant agencies. Maybe domestic abuse, and we just refer it on to social services, police, or whatever our appropriate authority is. So what we've noticed, thankfully, certainly through COVID, we did a modified enhanced home safety checks where it may have been done virtually. The home safety visit, we may have phoned them, we may have done using Facebook, FaceTime, or something similar, way beyond my skills. But or we may have, on some instances, we may have knocked the door and actually just gave them smoke alarms, smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, and advice leaflet, so they actually could resolve the issues themselves if they didn't have any smoke detection in their home. So thankfully, from COVID, we did a modified approach, but as now restrictions have been lifted, it's pleasing that we're returning back to normality now, and we're getting over the threshold of people's homes, the most vulnerable in your communities, to actually give them the advice we believe that they need to make their lives safer in their home. And the other key thing we do when we do have a failure, when we do have a fire in somebody's home, one of the things we push for many years, again, which is good, after every incident, and thankfully, some may only be sort of a pan on a hob or a very small fire. On every occasion, our operational crews, after that incident, either straight immediately after that call or a day or so after, will go back there and do a full risk assessment, fire enhanced home safety check to make that family safer than they were before the fire by giving them advice and intervention. Okay, so sorry for dwelling, but I think there's a number of new members and it's worth just trying to explain a bit of detail behind the report. So moving on a little bit, so that's I've picked up a bit about home fire safety checks, or enhanced home fire safety checks. Another key bit, thankfully, is getting back for our businesses, commercial premises. Our business fire safety teams now are able to actually go back and through a grading system, visit the most high risk business premises in South Wales to actually give advice to make sure they're as safe as they can. Particular work for the business fire safety team would be dealing with high-rise premises, high-rise living premises, particularly Cardiff, Newport, south of the M4. And again, thankfully, we can get back visiting those, but not just from a business fire safety point of view, from a community safety point of view. Our community safety teams are going into individual premises where people need request advice to give them the advice they need as well. So that's something that's changing as well. Another thing you'll pick up on within the report is a paragraph there, just shows the type and change to the incident types we're attending. We seem to be assisting other agencies. This has been prevalent for a number of years, but more so over COVID. We seem to be assisting other agencies more now. And it's really hard to actually define why that has happened, but it just looks like it's a bit of a knock-on from the demands of COVID. Demands on the WAST, the health service, that we just seem to be a service that we're having calls through 999 to assist people in their time of need. So we are sort of attending more, as it says there, incidents with police and ambulance through the last 2 years. We have been, and this has come through in last year's stats as well. And it also mentions bariatrics. So that is people over 20 stone where basically they're trapped in their home, and when they have a medical emergency, they need WASC need assistance to get them in a quick manner home from their home to a place of care in a hospital. So with the increase in numbers, and they are detailed in that report. Okay, so if I move on then, my page numbers. So that we've got a sundial that gives you a summary. And it tells you 144, and it tells you if we're better than our targets, or 5% within our targets, or 5% we've missed our target by 5% or more. So as you can see from there, 4 of the indicators are green, 2 amber and 1 red. And I'll just go through specific indicators and pick out some points from the preceding 7 indicators. So page 145. Is the total fires attended. We've had a slight increase there at 2%, but it is 3% below the target we set this time last year. So, and as you can see, slightly when you look at the 6-year trend, it's slightly below, I guess, pre-COVID numbers, which is pleasing. But and it does the other couple of key things as well. Deliberate fires still account for 71%. Of the cause we attend, of the fires we attend. So still a massive proportion deliberate fires. So that's grass, refuge, rubbish fires is some of the high numbers that account for total number of fire calls. When we move on to total false alarms attended, so this could be in a domestic setting where the smoke alarm has gone off, and the neighbours ring it up and saying, "Oh, the smoke alarm's going off." And they request our assistance. It could be somebody seeing steam, or it could be in a business premise, education premise, hospital, where alarm is activated, and we respond as a service. In all these cases, yes, it's a negative response if there's an issue with an alarm system. We always see it as a positive issue that we attend. Again, if we go to a business premise, school, hospital, after that event, we will always give advice on how they can actually reduce accidental activations. And if it's due to process, it could have been a small, we see bad practices there, particularly in our business fire safety teams, where we see bad practice like fire doors wedged, or perhaps fire extinguishers that obviously haven't been serviced, and other sort of contraventions. It gives us the opportunity to look in these business commercial premises at a time we would not necessarily see them. And it allows us, through our business fire safety team, to actually visit those premises and make it safer again, if needed, than it was prior to our visit. So we see our attendance at alarm activation as an important sort of part of our overall business fire safety strategy and community safety strategy. Moving on to total RTCs, quite clearly we can see the trend going down for the 2 years of the pandemic. Less people on the road. It got slightly up for this year as people have returned to work, a bit of normality. but it's 14% below our target, but it is increasing. It'll be interesting to see those numbers now, how the working patterns of people change from hybrid ways of working and less people going sort of to the office and to their factories, well, factories are but offices and other locations. So total other special service calls, and this ties in with a narrative in the report earlier, 19% increase and 15% above our target. Affecting an entry is quite a high number. So that's where we've been requested for a variety of reasons to force entry in somebody's home or vehicle or whatever because of a safety issue. And that's something we're trying to understand. That's when I've got my team looking at the detail. They're going back through that, and I've requested they understand that to ensure that we're using our resources appropriately and we're not being used by other services to do a service that perhaps we shouldn't be doing. So we are currently reviewing that to ensure that our future actions are in line with our policies and the policies we've set. Total deaths and injuries is 9% below the target, but there's been a slight increase in serious injuries. And again, this is something overall of deaths and injuries to people in fire we use to try and understand individual behaviours in fire. Do people go and tackle the fire when they have a small fire? If it's a large fire, we're trying to understand it to ensure, again, our community safety message is in line with human behaviour. So that's something we are working with. So when we look at, so that was the total deaths and injuries. There were 7 fatalities, 3 less than the previous, but still 7 too many. One is one too many, but we do on every occasion do a very thorough review of the circumstance of each fire death, not actually at the time of the fire, but before that. Were they seen by other agencies? Were they known by other agencies? If there was a particular risk we picked up in the home after the fire, if we were notified of that, could we have put mitigation in place to potentially reduce that risk? And that's something we do on every occasion. There's a serious injury or an accidental or deliberate fire death. Then we've got the total fire deaths and injuries, so accidental fire deaths and injuries. And again, you can see the stats are there, and it's a rise of 21% there. 6 fatalities, I said it was 7. 6 were accidental. That means 1 was deliberate. 2 less than the previous year. And again, 9 serious injuries, 4 more than the previous year. And it's something, again, we're looking at to understand. And then the final indicator is the percentage of dwelling fires confined to the room of origin. So this statistic, the higher the number, the better it is. So yeah, you can see it's very static as a trend line. We're below the target we set of 85%, but we're slightly better than last year. The number of things, it's really hard to actually influence this, but the one influence may be, and it's very hard, is that the earlier somebody calls us when they have a fire, the quicker we get there. So it's sort of perhaps indicating the speed of calling the fire service for assistance. So that's the individual indicators. And then what you find on page 149 on is a set of individual indicators and a narrative for each of your unitary authority areas. So that gives you an explanation. Additional to this, if you have, hopefully you have, or you will be receiving details of your local group manager. So that's the person who looks after all the stations in your particular unitary authority area, with details of the station commanders in that area. I'm happy to take questions on any of this, but if you wish to delve and discuss the indicators in your area, I believe you've been sent or will be sent the details of your local commanders. So that's there for you. And the other thing, one of the things they do is attend PSBs so that they actually link in any community risk management plans that we have. So any preventative work and education work, we're linking them to the data we see in individual unitary authorities, individual station areas, and we're working with the partners through PSBs and the subs groups to reduce risk in your communities.
I
I'm
got-
happy to take questions.
Hang on, okay, hang on,
Oh, sorry.
hang on a minute.
Sorry,
Before we
Chair.
start, no, Debbie, nobody's had any contact details yet from the group area managers.
No, I said it, I know the paper's done.
Right.
I know it's either you would have had it yet or it is
Right.
imminent.
Just to let you know that one,
Your
yeah.
mail list.
Yeah. Dan, I can see you up there. I was wondering where you were. I thought you'd lost your voice, Dan.
No, Chair. I couldn't add anything to the earlier debates. My only question is obviously, because of COVID, looking at these stats, most of them have gone slightly in a negative direction, but how much of that is down to obviously COVID being a unique circumstance in the last 2 years? And could we be sent comparisons? I know you've already mentioned it a bit, but comparisons of this year to 2019 more in detail, because I think that might be more useful. But I do also want to obviously recognise the improvement obviously in reductions of suicide as has happened, but I presume the authority thinks that's mainly down to obviously lockdowns being over and being in the more post-pandemic era.
It is difficult to see the trend line, particularly with those sort of 2 years that of COVID. But one of the things that say RTCs have clearly gone down. When you look at fires in the home, they're fairly static, but there would have been more people in the home. So that may have seen the risk would have increased, more activity in the home. But there again, we would have had early warning as well because people in the home and spotting the fire early. So I can't give you an answer other than really difficult to predict. But we do try and learn as much as we can from the occurrences in our communities as they occur. I'm sure if that answers your question, Councillor Norton.
It does partly, but I wanted to see if there's any way we can just get email data of 2019 so we can just compare them to current data, because I think that might be a bit more useful. Because you've had a lot of one-offs, and obviously in COVID, less people driving, certain activities happening less. So I think it's let's rely on looking on last year's data compared to this year's data.
Yeah, I'm happy to get a 19 figure set out if that's what you want, Chair.
Yeah.
What I would say, I think we will be in a different position going forward, because I don't think we're going to be living now as we did in 2019. Certainly from personal experience, family, friends, there's a lot more people working from home now and actually permanently working from home, and that than they were in 2019. I think it was very limited working from home. But I see quite a lot of people have changed behaviour, change their type of employment, the way they work.
Okay. Thanks, lad. McDad? Get your hand up. No? No? You on mute?
Over a copy.
Nope. Okay, then we go to Bethan.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I was just going to ask, what I've been hearing anecdotally is that the cost of living crisis is kind of forcing people to use unsafe appliances to kind of heat their homes, so like radiator heaters or halogen heaters, and also using chip pans more frequently because they don't want to turn the oven on to try and save money on their electricity bills. I just wondered if that was something that maybe you recognise as well, and if it was, is that something that you factor into your advice when visiting householders who might be living in fuel poverty, for example?
Yeah, that's a real good point. So we have noticed in a way that people, rather than heat the whole of their home, they heat in single rooms through portable heaters, gas heaters, or electrical heaters, and it's something that we are aware of and trying to get that message out there. I think one of the key things as councillors is the interaction with other agencies. If we've got any influence, we're going to get social services, district nurses, people into people's homes, particularly when you go to winter months, and they are the people that are more likely to come across bad practice such as that. And what we are saying is report it to us so we can go there and give them advice, the likes of fire guards. And we prefer if it's safer if the home's heated central heating or other means rather than portable heaters. So we are aware of it. We are aware there could be more fires caused by that because people are drying clothes in front of these, or even themselves quite remaining close to one of those heaters. So we are aware of it. We're trying to get our message out, but through our PSB and other work, we're trying to ask other agencies to signpost those when that happens, so we can actually try and advise the occupier accordingly.
Oh, I'm sorry, Chair, I have to leave.
Right, that's okay, no, you're got a prior package money, I
Yeah.
fully understand that.
Thanks.
Martin?
Yeah, question is about the disaggregation of the statistics. Drill down to different housing types. I used to be employed by a registered social landlord, and I know there was a lot of really good work happening between that sector and the fire service. So it would be interesting to see if there are any particular trends according to whether regular occupiers, private rented sector, and also the social rented sector.
Yeah, we have got those trends, and what we're able to do, and particularly the demographics of where people live in, their income, their family status, so the single parents. But you know, generally, we see the serious injuries and deaths in elderly. It's 60% of the accidental fires in homes are in the kitchen area. So we know the behaviours, and we do try and target the most vulnerable, as you talk, that we've identified, and we use data to identify who are the people we're going to target for a home safety check. So we do that, and we will work with some of the social landlords where we can. Yeah.
I go back to Mick. You want to speak now? You got your hand up?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Apologies, Chair. I got frozen out for some reason. I had to leave and rejoin again.
That's
But
okay.
I'm in now, so I can see you. I couldn't switch my mic or camera before. Yeah, my question was about these individual stats for the various authorities. I'm new to this, so I really haven't had a chance to look at them all and sort of try and cross-correlate between them. But my question is there a pattern? Have we noticed a pattern that, for example, show, sort of largely urban areas like Newport, Cardiff, etc., will be different from others, smaller towns, smaller, sort of smaller council areas? Is there a pattern? Are there more issues, for example, with, urban concentration when it comes to fire accidents and attendances, that sort of thing?
Yeah, we do see a difference, and we look at this, and the local group manager with their team will look at the individual unitary authority data and will devise their community risk management plans. So that's how we actually try and give advice and education to the public in the area and work with partners based on those statistics. So for Newport, yeah, a number of years ago, we saw a high number, this is as an example. So we saw a high number of deliberate vehicle fires. And we worked in particularly the Dufferin area, because there was a lot of there was a high number there. And through our intervention and a trend, because we can't just be down to our work, the price of metal went up, so the second fire its cars. So there's lots of different influences on the behaviour of people. We saw the numbers in Newport come down. We have had spike. We will have spikes as well. So once we get a what we'll see, particularly in our urban areas, is when we do have a fire sector in the area, we will have spikes in particular localities, and we do try and identify those, work with the police and others to try and identify the culprit and appropriate interaction. So yeah, we do look at them, and as I suggest, Wally, once the details of your local group managers, station managers are sent out, if you want to discuss the local data and what we're doing about it, just contact the group manager.
Yeah, I'm glad you sort of mentioned Newport, because a sort of a very quick comparison between Newport and Cardiff. I felt Newport has sort of higher than average compared to Cardiff, because if you look at the populations in Newport relative to Cardiff, then I think you find that I would say Newport is relatively, you know, significantly higher than, say, pro rata kind of population and size of Cardiff, really. So, yeah, and I think, you know, that should give us some idea, you know, what's happening here, really. Why do we have this sort of higher incident rate and so on?
Yeah, what I can assure all members, so I think you're having a report for the whole of the service, you're having a report for the whole of your unitary authorities there. But your 5 group managers do get together, they go through this data, we'll go through it quarterly, and they are the people trying to understand what's happening. And there'll be areas of each of your communities that we'll know are more prevalent to fires than others, and it's trying to understand what's happening there. And they will be the people that will try to put the interactions in place to reduce the number of fires and other instances in your area. So, you know, more than happy to have a discussion outside of here or with any of you, or if you want with your group manager.
Okay, thank you very so much. David, how's your leg to start off with? Because you broke a leg.
Yeah, well, thanks very much. It's getting better. I'm pleased to say that. Can I go on to the issue of RTCs and touch on the previous agenda item as well? For members who don't know me, I'm retired from the Welsh Ambulance Service in March. So I did think about long and hard about declaring an interest in the previous matter, but because I'm retired, I no longer have allegiances to the service. Going on to the RTCs, I'm just wondering how much the service are being used as first boots on the ground. As for an RTC, if it's been called in, the police are busy, as we know, WAST are busy, and any service or any uniformed member on the ground is better than none at all. I've been put in that position numerous times by the police where we did have a few more crews that they were saying, well, at least you're on the ground and you can report back. I'm just wondering, is that something that we've considered? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. No, I'd say it isn't happening as a general or as a norm. I think the way our control room filter the calls to determine if it's warranted, we attend. So obviously, if somebody's trapped, there's been a serious collision, and perhaps nobody's there to confirm the detail one way or t'other, then we will respond. But if it's obvious from the call taker that it's inappropriate for us to respond, then our control room will mobilise the crowd. The other things we do, we slightly filter calls. If somebody's not trapped, we know that, then we will only send 1 appliances. Where if there's a vehicle on its side overturned and is clearly people trapped, then we send a greater weight of response. So and we send a number of appliances. So we do vary our response depending on the information we have, and if appropriate, we won't respond either.
It's okay. Deputy Chair's phone going off.
£5 charity.
Thanks.
Sorry. Did that answer your questions, Councillor David?
Yeah, thanks very much. Yes, as I say, it going back to my previous occupations, as I say, I was aware that sometimes shall we say, a flanker is used.
Do I have no flanker for a long time? No. Anybody else got it? So, yeah.
Thanks for the report. It's not a question, it's praise more than anything. Firefighters' roles have changed. You're now doing everything down to domestic abuse, looking after the vulnerable, looking after the elderly. You're preventing falls, you're doing so much. So there's praise from me for you for that. Domestic abuse, it's not just us women that's abused, we can have men that's abused also. Men are very hard to get to talk about that. So I praise you on that as well. The second one is the fire alarms. I work very closely to the fire stations within my ward. As a councillor, I'm out and about. Housing associations, they put the fire alarms in. My main concern is how they are vulnerable in private homes that they bought. So I often go around and I speak to my residents, and the 2 fire stations that I work with, I make an appointment with them for them to go in and put the fire alarms in. And you've done this also.
Yeah.
Through the lockdowns, we couldn't do it, but now we're back out there doing it. So thank you.
Polly, yeah.
Sorry, I'd like to commend you on the work on the false alarms, because apart from educational establishments, all the other stuff is dropping the hospitals, residential homes, so that shows that the education, your business, fire safety teams doing is working. And the only thing that's missing on these forms, and it's a shame that we can't have it because it would be a massive pat on your back. All these prevention work that you're doing, you haven't got stats to say how many lives you've improved or saved just by using your words rather than action. So all the people, all the good things that you've done on this report is probably tenfold that the amount of people you've helped in the house. So thank you very much.
It took the works, that's what I was going to say. I was going to say that, yeah. But also on that point as well, Debbie, there's a new law come in now that all social landlords, not big social landlords, private social landlords, has got to have their alarms, fire alarms to the mains. Do you think that's going to cause more problems with false alarms than before?
No,
That's been raised with me by quite a few people.
Yeah, I think we've got a greater good of fitting hardwired smoke alarm, and I think that is a greater good there. Yeah, I think there's been a slight delay in the implementation of that legislation, and I believe it doesn't fully come in for another year, I think. But yeah, I think we'd welcome that, and hardwired smoke alarms, are the way forward.
Yeah, I think so, but it's been a couple of people who I know own, say, 10 or 12 houses or private landlords say they think that's causing a problem.
Yeah,
Before people pull the battery out, and that was it. Now the alarm is going to, and it could be a false alarm or something.
I think we'd advocate having an escape plan, having so when the alarm goes, a family are well used to what they have to do to actually make themselves safe in the first instance, rather than thinking it's going to be a false alarm.
Who wants to come in?
Yeah, just to pick up Councillor Buckley's comments, observation. I did declare in a members' training day that I'm a bit of a data stats geek. These are only our core statutory indicators that we must report on, and they're in statute by and so that's why we haven't got the full suite of where we go into a lot more detail around the owner occupier and some of the stuff that you talk about.
Please don't think it was a criticism. No, in no way. It was.
We can bore you for hours or 5.
Bedtime reading.
Yeah, but no, but it is a good point. We do all this extra work, and I think perhaps we could look in at adding extra stuff in for gives us more of a ammunition and to fight the higher above us, as I call them.
Something that the scrutiny group might want to have a look at.
I think that's a really, really good thing on the new scrutiny committee to look at that. Yeah,
I've raised this over the last couple of years that we don't promote ourselves.
Yeah, I've said it's
best ability, isn't it? Yeah.
No, I told you that's a really good thing for the new scrutiny committee to look at.
Chair.
Definitely.
It's probably worth noting as well for members that the false alarms is an area of interest that the Welsh Government are looking at, and Audit Wales are coming in later in the year doing an audit specifically around sort of better understanding for us as a service of the causes and implications of false alarms. We'll have a detailed report from Audit Wales later in the year on that.
Good. Any other questions? Oh, well, thanks, Dewey. That's good. And members, you get the statistics for your own local authority site you, and you can pass that on to your fellow members of your own authority. You can pass those details on. So the next item on the agenda, which is the Welsh language standards. 159. Sarah's, Andrew, what's he to?
Yes, indeed.
Are you there, Andrew?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Right, yep.
Good morning. Just a brief overview for you in terms of the services performance in relation to the Welsh language standards. Certainly for the new members among you, just a brief overview. As a result of the Welsh language measure that was introduced in 2011, that placed certain obligations upon all of the public sector bodies within Wales. And those public sector bodies were introduced to the measure on a phased basis, and for fire that was 2016. So even though it feels quite new to us still, you know, we're almost 6 years in now. Initially we had, I think it was 157 standards that were placed upon us, and through various discussions since September 2016, that's reduced to 150. And that reduction was undertaken in agreement with the Welsh Language Commissioner's Office. Those 7 were deemed not to be relevant anymore. So just a brief overview then, if you like, as to where we're at present. Of those 150 standards, you'll see the table in 2.2. There are 145 in the green category, and just 5 remaining now in the amber category, and these refer to translation primarily, and assessing the language skills of our employees. They're a focus for us at the moment, and we've been in constant communication with the compliance officers of the Welsh Language Commissioner around how we can best deal with these matters. We last met with the compliance officers, it was more than 12 months ago now, but certainly during their last face-to-face visit with us, they were highly complimentary of the services performance in respect of the Welsh language standards. So that was a big positive outcome for that meeting we had with them. Of those 150 standards, just to give you an idea, at the bottom of 2.2, there's a link there. I used to print these standards out, but you can imagine the amount of paper that took. So we just include a link in this particular report. So if you wish to have a greater understanding of what the standards are. But in essence, that they refer to issues such as communications, including social media, which I'll come on to later, the wide range of the services activities, the services that we provide, and policy making. And as I say, if you wish to click on that link, you'll have a better overview of what the actual standards are. In relation to the social media hits, now I'm no expert in this field, but you'll see on the appendix at the end of the report that certainly in terms of Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, etc., the number of users, the number of hits, the number of likes are generally going in the right direction. And this is due in a time, obviously, of the pandemic, so we're not sure what influence that is having in particular. But certainly the numbers are going, as I say, in the right direction, and certainly indicating that people are viewing the Welsh version of our external website. Well, one of those standards is to promote the ability for individuals to learn the language of Welsh. We used to do that internally previously. We used to have a Welsh language trainer in-house, but it became ever more difficult to recruit. They've been high demand as a result of the Welsh language measure, as you can imagine. And we've now given individual members of staff time off, and we pay for courses if necessary for individuals. Now, certainly during the pandemic, the number of individuals who've attended academic Welsh language learning courses has reduced from what it was previous. I dare say, and I think I've mentioned this in a previous HR Qualities meeting in the last 2 years, people have had other perhaps commitments and priorities than delving into learning the Welsh language, but that is certainly a priority of us going forward now as we come out and the new academic year is upon us. That is certainly something that we'll be encouraging going forward. I mentioned earlier about the number of staff that have Welsh language skills. We've had returns of roughly 3/4 of staff who can return on their core HR portal and can self-assess in terms of their abilities, in terms of speaking, reading, understanding the language of Welsh, and of those individuals that have responded, 3/4 have assessed themselves as having little to no skills in this area. So that is certainly something that we're looking to address in terms of basic Welsh language learning going forward. In terms of recruitment, we also, for all meetings and recruitment interviews, etc., we give individuals the opportunity of conducting the meeting through the medium of Welsh. And in the last year, we actually have had our first request to undertake a recruitment interview through Welsh, which was a bit of a landmark for us. We hadn't had any requests previous, but we were able to accommodate that, and that interview was carried out smoothly and to the satisfaction of the individual concerned. So going forward, certainly some key drivers, encouraging the use of Welsh within the organisation, making sure that we promote it at every opportunity, and really just looking at new ways of increasing interest in the Welsh language. We're looking at things like social events. We're looking at segregating a certain area of our dining facilities so individuals can sit in an area which will be entirely Welsh speaking, if you like, so if people want to go and practice their Welsh, they can. So I would say overall, just looking at ways in which we can promote the language of our country. And that pretty much covers the report. As I say, that there are stats attached to it. I'll be more than happy to take on board any questions any members may have.
Any questions, members? I've got one for you. In local authorities, we're going to do simultaneous translation.
Yes.
Where do we stand on the fire authority on this?
I noticed Sarah Watkins isn't here at the moment, but.
For me to pick it up, Ant?
Do you want? Yeah.
This question got to be asked because you know it's mandatory in local authorities.
Yeah, obviously with the legislation, should it be requested, we would have to provide simultaneous translation. Up until this point, as an authority, nobody's requested it, but it is a provision that should any member wish to conduct any of the business in Welsh, we would have to put that provision in place.
What if somebody who's not a member of this fire authority outside says, I've watched the webcast in and it's not Welsh? What happens then?
No, it's only for members of the authority if they want to conduct the business in Welsh at this moment in time, that we'd have to put the provision in place for.
Right, I want to clear that because you never know, somebody might say that there's been no Welsh translation. I want to hear the all in Welsh. So
because even if we had the provision in place, the only bits that would be in Welsh would be if an individual member chose to conduct the
I know that.
in Welsh.
So I've got to ask these questions.
So yeah, legislation says that we do have to provide it, but say up until this point in time, we haven't had that request.
Right, that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, you never know, you never know. Next weekend. Okay, so everybody's happy with that. So we're going to item 7.5, emergency use of delegated powers. You're right.
Sorry, Chair.
Oh, sorry.
I do apologise, Chair. I have my hand up.
Who's that?
Dan.
Oh, Dan. Sorry, Dan. I didn't see you, Dan. You're going to a little screen at the moment in the corner.
That's okay. Basically, I just wanted to ask a follow-up question, obviously, of yours, which is a really good question. Would it be possible for authority to look at costing of obviously doing translation in meetings? Because it might be something a member or a future member does request, and it is something we need to be ready to move on, rather than potentially having no idea how to do it if it comes up at kind of a last minute request. So it would be good for members to know what will the costings be and how we plan to do it. Particularly doing it as hybrid as well, because you might have a member who's online who wants to speak in Welsh.
Diolch yn fawr iawn. Yes, go on, yeah.
Yeah, Councillor Norton, obviously is something that we are considering. Obviously with the changes and the the sort of new technology that we're trying to put in place now. We'll be moving to mod.gov in the near future as well. So yeah, all of those impacts that we're trying to build in, and part of the costing program that we're doing, as well as the work that's going on in the conference room as well. So it's all built into the overall package that we're looking at.
I'm glad you said about mod.gov. I really do like that. I'm really pleased about that. Okay, does that answer your question, Dan? Yeah, okay, thanks.
I didn't see it.
No, I didn't.
Chair, before we move on, can I just ask in room 9, Scott or Gerard, if you could put it back on? The gallery view was changed in this room. No, that's better.
That's it, yeah, we did remember that. That's why I missed forward Dan. Yes.
Right, watch.
There, Dan's back now. Yeah. So we go on to the delegated hearing. Yes.
Thanks, Chair. This just a brief report on the emergency use delegated powers. Obviously, in a year of an election, in the period between the end of March, or the last meeting of the authority, and then period up until the first meeting, the new authority following the AGM, there's obviously there may be some times where it's necessary to conduct business using delegated powers under our scheme of delegations, and they clearly set out within our scheme of delegations that myself and the chief were given delegated powers at the March meeting, approval to undertake any business as necessary. During that period, it became necessary, we'd run a large procurement exercise for supply of hydraulic cutting equipment. And then, due to the value of the contract being in excess of 1.5 million, a contract standing order says that any contracts over that value have to be approved by the fire authority. Obviously, with no fire authority sitting until today, I had to use those delegated powers. So, in consultation with the chief fire officer, I signed the contract on the 3rd of May to award the contract for the value of 1.8 million to Turberg DTS UK, we know as Hull Matro. So that puts in place the contract for the supply of that equipment over the next 3 years. So it's essential equipment that we use, but it was necessary to get that contract up and running as soon as possible.
Yeah, and I did have a call as well over it. So,
And before the price goes up.
yes. Okay, well, thank you for that, Geraint. So we go to the next section of the reports now, which are for decisions, so votes will have to be taken on these. So 8.1.
Yep, thanks, Chair. I'll take this one again.
Yeah.
This report sets out basically our the sort of planning process that we have around those strategic objectives and corporate plans. This is the first phase of the sort of initial phase of the consultation process that we use. We'll be coming back to the authority later in the year. It starts a statutory consultation process starts in October and runs to the end of January. The statutory 12-week there, and then we'll come back with responses on there. But what we do, and this was raised as a sort of area of good practice by Audit Wales, is to do an initial sort of survey, which just sort of does a temperature check for the organisation before we go out to a more formal consultation process. So what we do every year, before the first fire authority, we run a consultation process with our staff and some of our key stakeholder groups, just to try and see what the sort of themes are that need to feed into our, do we need to feed in any changes into our strategic themes going forward as part of the formal consultation. So this report sets out the process that we run, and it gives some of the feedback in terms of what we received from those surveys. So Appendix 1 on page 179 sets out what the current strategic themes are, the 8 strategic themes, which are quoted on in our earlier report. And then on page 180, it sets out the proposed objectives that we have against each one of those strategic themes. On Appendix 2, then, obviously, it's the feedback from the consultation process that we did, so that initial temperature check. And we circulated it out to all of our stakeholders, to all of our staff, and we got 130 responses this year. So it's not a high number, but it's an increasing number. We are getting more responses each year. Obviously, as you'd expect, the majority of the responses that we get are from staff, and a lot of the responses that we had this year were from corporate staff. And some of the themes, you know, the main sort of themes that were coming through within the consultation process was around improving staff morale, listening to staff, valuing staff, staff welfare, staff well-being is fairly high on the agenda. There was feedback around improved and increasing engagement with our communities. There was, as you'd expect, was with the staff survey, asking for improved staff remuneration. And there was also a high response rate around focusing on service delivery. So as part of the process, as I say, we asked for their initial feedback, take that feedback on board and how that feeds into the overall process. What we do is look at, in terms of those feedbacks, do they fit naturally in with the strategic themes that we've got in place? And I think the majority of them do. So it wouldn't be proposing at this point to necessarily change the overall strategic theme, but in be looking at some more detailed actions or adding some actions in as to what we look for in addressing some of those strategic themes. So that's some of the things that we'll be looking to do, and the report asks, you know, the recommendations ask to give me delegation to make some of those amendments into building that into our consultation process. Obviously the overall survey identifies what people deem as areas for improvement, areas for change, and also areas where they think we should perhaps do less of the, you know, areas we should focus less on and perhaps focus on other areas. So that's all the feedback that's there. So I'll pause at that point. So see if there's any questions.
Steve, yeah. With the strategic themes you've got there,
yeah,
with the amount of people that provide you data, how are you going to put the percentage data for each question of the
Yeah, we do. We've got all that detail. Didn't want to put too much of the detail into the report, but there's detail behind the scenes.
The only reason is that maybe one topic that everybody seems to target.
Yeah. So some of the charts will show, you know, some of the levels of feedback against each. We've obviously got all the data to drill down on to focus into specific areas.
Dan?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm just looking at Appendix 1 on the table about some of these themes, and where it says continuing to work effectively, and it's sort of explained on the right, be clear and publicly accountable, maximize value for money, develop new ways of working. I'm just asking really, how do we know if we are doing those? How do we measure our progress with those sort of three areas?
I think it probably comes down to some of those, the earlier report which we presented on our actions and the sort of performance data. So meeting out statutory performance requirements.
Okay, so we formally do actually evaluate, yeah, assess, you know, how we sort of progress along those themes. And
yeah, so obviously, say if we meet in our statutory requirements, you know, we deem that as working effectively. If we're not meeting it, then there's areas of focus that we need to address. And obviously, if we're out overperforming, obviously that meets our requirements to it. Does that answer your question, Councillor Almy?
yeah, well, as I said, Chair, I'm a bit new on this, so presumably we will have to watch how you know, the work in the committees and all that.
Yeah, obviously all those, a lot of the performance data gets reported through the Finance Committee as well. So yeah, there's regular quarterly reports on that performance data.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay. Dan?
Hi, Chair. Yeah, thank you. My question was obviously, if you look for the details of survey, I know obviously it's only a small number of staff, particularly a small number of firefighters have actually responded to it. But obviously there is a clear difference between what control staff want. Obviously, when it comes to partnership, generally been a lot more in favour of partnership, particularly with Rouse Ambulance, and what the actual firefighters who did respond to a survey want, which is generally less partnership than the control staff and what actually Welsh Government wants us to do, and as an authority, what's the direction we're going to. So my concern is, how can we look to engage firefighters and a greater number of them and actually see obviously how we obviously bring them along with us with any obviously greater partnership working, because obviously it's only a very small sample, but from the sample we have, and it's a significant obviously number is unhappy, we're potentially doing obviously more partnership work.
Yeah, obviously it's an ongoing challenge for us, Councillor Norton. The communication and engagement with stations is a two-way process, and you know it's something that we do pay a lot of emphasis on and do a lot of work. And we have an engagement team in with our media and comms team, and they're out regularly on on stations. As a senior management team, we all do visits to stations, and as much as possible we do engagement and capture feedback through that. I suppose it's like everything when you do a survey. There's so many surveys that go on. I think there's a bit of survey fatigue out there within the service, and very often it's probably people who've only got a certain issue that they want to raise. Sometimes they're the only ones that are responding to surveys. But it's something we are continuously working on. We're continuously trying to improve that engagement process and take on board all the feedback we get. You've reminded me on that point, though, Councillor Norton, is the one thing we are trying to do though as well is get more engagement in terms of these type of surveys and feedback from members of the public. So as members, if there's any sort of other networks that you can assist us in tapping into, a lot of the feedback that we do get from these, it tends to be through community councils, town and community councils. But if there's wider groups that you think we would benefit from as being part of a stakeholder group, by all means feed that back through me or my team.
Yeah. Do you want to come in?
Yes, please, thank you. My proposal is in relation to the second recommendation. If involvement and engagement work is continuing as it should, it's obviously sensible to have the delegated powers to be able to review and refine those objectives to respond to that involvement and engagement. For the sake of good governance, I think that recommendation should just add that where there are changes made, there would be a report back.
Yeah,
there
will be a report back, yeah.
Do, but would just be good to see.
But yeah, by all means, we can add that to the recommendation.
That's always the case, but it's nice to be said in the meeting, so it's on record as well. Yeah, David.
Yeah, thanks. Just touching on feedback and surveys. No matter what organisation I've been dealing with, if it's online, everybody thinks it's a bit the big brother watching you. And they're afraid to say what they exactly feel with the thought of being traced. And no matter what anybody says that it's confidential or that they can't, they'll always believe it. Has the thought been put in sealed and post-addressed survey forms that go back to headquarters with no form of identification to get what the firefighters feel? Thank you.
I wouldn't say it's something that we particularly targeted as a method for achieving an increase in number of returns. We've tried, obviously, with the our sustainability agenda to move away from paper-based surveys, and to be honest, I don't think we've had a great deal of success with them in the past either. So it's looking for other methods, really, whether it be using social media, electronic surveys, or just general feedback, as I say, from our visits, etc. Anything that we can do to feed into the process is just gonna make it better, as long as we capture in that feedback.
Yes, because what we have found is that even in this day and age, there are still members of staff in all walks of life that distrust electronic and social media. They distrust computers because once it's on computer, the world knows about it. They'd be okay talking one-to-one or putting something on paper where they didn't add their name, but once it's on social media or electronic media, it's there forever, and that's the feeling they have. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and yeah, as I say, it's certainly feedback that we have received in the past, that even as much as we say it's anonymous, yeah, I agree, staff don't always believe it.
Yeah.
The only point I was going to make, and you have answered most of it, is it worth asking the union to try and get the firefighting staff to engage? Because
Yeah,
approximately 1,000 staff.
Yeah, we know as part of, you know, the negotiating committee that we have with the unions, it does come up from time to time in terms of feedback and engagement. Yeah, and they are supportive. They actually do support us in that. There's, you know, there's only so much you can push for.
Steve?
Can I ask you what you do when you're doing, like I went to a big event a week ago. What are we doing there? Because you could target large audiences to get some responses. Have I never seen any of that there?
Yeah, we have done in the past. It's certainly where we get invites to events.
I mean, it's a better target, you know.
Either our community safety teams that will be there, you know, working as part of the event, or very often a part of that engagement team that we got, you know, media and comms team, they'll attend the event as well. And we've had other staff, you know, support the events and go there with tablets and try and, you know, fill in the forms and ask people to fill in the forms while they're there. So that is a method that we do use.
Any other further questions? Okay, so we go on to the recommendations to approve the proposed themes and objectives set out in appendix 1 for engagement events, preparation of document. Stage 2 of the annual improvement plan, South Wales Fire and Rescue into the site by 31st of October 2022. And to approve the delegation to the Director of Corporate Estates and Head of Corporate Support to review the refined process as necessary, and with the amendment that Kate has put on it. Everybody in agreement with that? Can we show a show of hands, please? This one. Okay, thank you. Yep. Thank you ever so much. It's passed. 7-9. Do you again get out? No, it's Alison. It's Alison. Sorry, it's Alison.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a review of our scheme pays procedure. And it's brought to Fire Authority for a decision. The procedure was reviewed by our local pension board on the 4th of July, the chair of which is Councillor Drake. And the recommendation is to update the procedure to incorporate changes in Appendix 2 that are outlined in red on. Fire Authority has the decision-making powers in relation to the scheme pays procedure. Local pension board is the recommending board to Fire Authority, and it does not have decision-making powers. Just to give you a quick sort of introduction to scheme pays and what it is. It's a facility that is available to members where their tax charge, so with significant pensions growth, they incur a tax charge. There is a commitment to pay the individual's tax charge, but there are certain sets of criteria. So if the tax charge is over £2,000, the service offers, and this is in the Finance Act, a mandatory scheme pays arrangement. So if the tax charge is over 2,000, it goes into a mandatory scheme pays arrangement where our pension administrator will administer that automatically. Below £2,000, the arrangement that we currently have is that there is no scope for an individual to use the voluntary scheme pays arrangement of any amount under £2,000. Currently, we are asking members to submit or make a payment up to £2,000. So what we're looking to do is remove the requirement to make a payment, instead offer the option below £2,000 that the individual receives the charge paid by the pension scheme, and the charge is then charged to the pension at the point of retirement. So slightly complicated, I know, but mandatory is where the pension administrator administers it automatically for us. And voluntary is where we can, or you can, as a fire authority, introduce a voluntary arrangement for an amount below £2,000, where the fire authority offers the individual the opportunity of the scheme paying their charge and then taking it off their pension at the point of retirement. So the proposal here centres very much around the voluntary scheme pays arrangement in particular, and makes that switch from not currently offering it as I've just described, to changing it to, as I've described, to making it available the pension scheme to pick up the charge initially. This meets the sort of best practice that's out there. So other FRSs in the UK are offering this arrangement, and it meets the HMRC government guidelines on scheme pays arrangements. So Appendix 1 shares our current procedure, and Appendix 2 shows you where the changes are, would occur. As I said, this was discussed at Local Pension Board on the 4th of July. It was approved, and now comes to final authority for the decision to be made on whether or not to accept the recommendations. I'll just check with the chair of the Local Pension Board. I've covered everything, and if you'd like to say anything.
Well, quite honestly, Alison, I agree with everything you said. I'm not definitely on a learning curve here. It all went through quite well on the So I would move those recommendations, definitely.
As the previous chair of the pension board, we talked about this for a long time. I'm really happy about it. I think this is the way forward.
Yeah.
Because we've had so many different conflicting things. This is definitely a way forward, and I wholeheartedly support this way. Yeah. So anybody else want to speak on this?
And can I thank Alison very much for her help?
She's better. Alison's better than phone a friend, to tell you that, on the pensions. So the recommendations is to receive an update from the chair of the Local Pensions Board, and if minded to accept the recommendations to the relation to the scheme payments procedure. Everybody in agreement with that? Yes, please. Yeah, 100%. Excellent. Okay, so we're going to item 8.3.
Yeah, Chair, I've got to declare an interest at this point.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So in line with our firefighting standing orders to fill a vacant position on what we class as executive leadership team. So that's myself, deputy chief, and 3 assistant chiefs. A vacancy arose with the ill health retirement of the previous director of corporate services. Regrettably, we lost Sally to health. And therefore that vacancy has arisen. Obviously, the first opportunity to seek fire authority approval is today, which I'm doing. The proposed timetable is on paragraph 2.5, which means that we can move fairly quickly to substantively fill this vacancy. The only amendment I was going to suggest, Chair, if I could, on paragraph 2.6, is to add the Assistant Chief Officer People Services onto the panel with myself to provide HR advice to the panel if needed there and then. Suggest. But happy to take any questions.
No. Any questions? Okay. So the recommendation is that members approve filling the post for the role of ASC corporate safety on a permanent basis, and that members approve the recruitment selection process in the timetable laid out in the report. All those in favour, please? Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
None against? Thank you. So we're going to item 8.4 of 217. Officers. Yes.
I will get you the move.
my mother-in-law sent me the meeting. The messages she's put it in.
You're not on Team Steve, you're all right. If you're the phone, yeah.
What about?
No, it's not. It's after now, it's pronounced that now. This is right, that's right, that's okay, right. Okay, welcome Mark, to out the first, I'm Steve Bradwick, I'm the chair of the Fire Authorities. Pam is my deputy, I can't call it vice chair, it's deputy chair, because I've been told off about that. So welcome to the meeting. We've asked you to come to explain this report to us, because it's quite complicated, quite a serious report. So over to you, please.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you for spending the time to hear what I have to say about the report. And there will be time, obviously, for questions when I've gone through a relatively brief presentation. So the questions, certainly, if you care to ask us as we go through, that's fine. If you'd like to hold fire until we're finished, that's also fine. So I will leave to you. Right. The agenda then for the meeting today, I'll say a few words about Total Reward Projects Limited, which is the company that I run with my business partner. The background to the pay review itself, very briefly, the pay data that we've used to assess the pay, particularly for the Chief Fire Officer, what the findings were, and the next steps which you might want to and wish to consider, and that will be very much in your gift, not mine. So, and then time for questions, of course. So, next slide, please. Right. Okay. So we have been commissioned, TRP for short, as an independent remuneration consultancy. I spend my life doing this type of thing. TRP is very much able to offer the type of service that the Fire Authority was seeking here. In other words, to assess the pay of the Chief Fire Officer and the other principal officers in the team here in Cardiff. I'm led to believe that the last formal review of this kind was last undertaken in 2004. So clearly there's been something of a gap between then and now. So that's the background. Then we've been asked to do this piece of work. If I could take the next slide, please.
In another room there, in another room.
Oh, right.
Yes, yeah, we know. Yeah.
Okay. The process then, we set off to, when we were approached, we thought, right, well, we need to work jolly quickly on this because it was just before Christmas of last year, and we had to have the report up and ready to go to the HR and Equalities Committee by the 24th of January. And they, of course, had to have that report in good advance time of that meeting. So we were able, though, to use the captured data that was giving us a range of information from comparator organisations, if like comparator services, captured about half of the national service providers. So that's quite a good, solid, broad representation, and perhaps most crucially, it included those comparators with whom you as a fire and rescue service are broadly compared. In other words, in population band 4. So that was already predetermined, that there are other representative or broadly similar organisations to yourselves in terms of scale. So we think the data capture was quite robust and solid. We were then able to analyse that data in a number of ways, which I will come on to explain to you. And then emerging out of that, of course, are the findings. What did it tell us? Which leads on, of course, to the development of the options that you may wish to take. All wrapped up in the report with those recommendations, which I trust each of you has a copy of, and you may well have had a chance to read it, even if some of it's gobbledygook, you can perhaps ask me questions, but that I trust has been given to you in good time. Okay, if I could take the next slide, please, next door. Here we are then. This is what we have by way of the data capture. 20, as I say, 25 fire and rescue services, including South Wales, across the United Kingdom. And that data told us what the current pay was. I use the past tense because we're talking about the captures in January, December of last year. So the current pay for the chief fire officers, the number of full-time equivalent employees in each of those fire and rescue services, the size of the population served by each of those services, and the scale or the size of the annual revenue budgets. And that's really where we were able to launch the piece of work that we did. So if I could take the next slide, please. The analysis then. This is talking about the ranking of what we term in the report, the work demand data. In other words, what's being asked of the service by way of its outputs, and the scale of it, the scale of the operation. So full-time equivalent employees at South Wales Fire and Rescue from the 25 was ranked 5th highest. In terms of the population it serves, South Wales Fire and Rescue Service is ranked 9 of 25. And finally, and here is a slight errata, I will correct that, size of the annual budget, it says 8, well, ranked 8th, it is in fact 7th. That was my fat finger, I do apologise, but it does in fact make the numbers or the aggregating that much more straightforward and does not in any way affect the outcome. So please read that as 7 out of 25. Then we come crucially onto the other half of the equation. We've looked at the work demand data. Let's shift to say, well, what's the reward data looking like? And from the list of those 25 comparators, the Chief Fire Officer of South Wales FRS is ranked 21 of 25. I think already you can see the separation and arguably the disconnect between the work demand data and that one line, the reward data, i.e. the level of pay. Okay, if I could please have the next slide. Findings then. Well, first of all, we needed to do something with those 3 separate lines of work demand data. So we aggregated those. And if you think about it, one was 5th, one was 7th, one was 9th. Add the 3 together, divide by 3, your cumulative, if you like, work demand rating was 7th in the overall rank. So that's where we find that. The job then, the task, was to say, well, okay, we've got reward data at 21st on the list. But we've got work demand data telling us that South Wales Fire and Rescue Service sits 7th amongst that group of comparator organisations. So what do we do with that? And the most sensible thing we could do with that is to say, let's align the work demand data to the reward data. And the way to do that is we took the rank of 7th and then said, what would pay look like if we made the pay of the chief fire officer ranked 7th in the reward data? And that's what we mean by the alignment here. And that produced for us, if ranked 7th in the reward data to align with the work demand data, pay would be 161,805. And that was reached simply by taking the fire and rescue service that was 6th, the one that was 8th in that list, and splitting the difference between the two. So there's no real science to it other than that. That's how that number was arrived at. In terms of the other principal officers, your ACO kindly provided the formulaic link between the pay of the chief fire officer and the other, like deputy, assistant chief fire officers, assistant chief officers, and the treasurer. I was given the link. In other words, once we've assessed the pay of the chief fire officer, everything else fell into place by virtue of the formulaic link. So there was no further brain scratching much to do there. That just fell as it fell. So they were the findings. Okay, if I could please move on to the next slide. Scenario modelling. Here, kindly provided for me, I didn't do this, but I assure you, are the figures that illustrate what the costs, indicative costs would be, depending on the type of or decision that you collectively come to. And they would be the implications if, for example, you decided on a 4% increase in chief fire officer pay. The resultant outcome of that would be an increase in baseline pay for the team that's covered by this capture of 31,669. I hasten to add that also includes the 4 heads of service who are not covered in this report, but I understand through the green book or the gold book, that there's the link for them too, that link still is extant and would have to be applied. So the total cost, including the heads of service, would be 31,669 if you, for example, chose a 4% increase as a result of this report. So that's just modelling to help us way through some of the number crunching. Okay, next slide, please.
There's a quick question there. Does that include on costs?
No, I don't think it does.
Right, thank you.
Because of the CFO says 1398.
Yeah.
The on costs with pension and employers' national insurance would have to go on top.
Yep, I wanted that made clear for the meeting. Yep, thank you.
Yep. Okay, next slide, please. So the options then, getting to the crux of the matter. Of course, it's in your gift. I can only tell you where I think you sit. I have no executive authority here. I know that. I can only say this is what I think would be best. But of course, it comes down to affordability. So you could implement this report in full if you're satisfied that it's affordable. You might, though, if, for example, you speak to each other and think this is beyond our purse at this time, it's too big a leap in one hit. Where this happens, typically we say to organisations, we appreciate that you're in charge of the finances. What about, though, considering moving in that direction, at least to the extent that you reasonably can? And that might mean, for example, well, maybe we could stage it over 2 or 3 years. If you come to a decision like that, or come to a determination of that kind, of course, it's not as simple as saying, well, you pay a third, and by the time we get to year 3, it will all catch up. As each year, 6, as you know fine well,
Comes on.
there's another piece of pay movement and on it goes. So it's a bit like credit, isn't it? It is a little bit of interest to pay. So, but I don't want to bamboozle you with numbers at this point, but I would just say, please bear that in mind. If you go for a staged approach, you will still have to run, over the course of, say, 2 or 3 years. It wouldn't be a straight divide by 3 and you've got the answer. It would move on a bit faster than that across years 2 and 3. And of course, the final option, throw me up, fine. I mean, I will tell you what I think it is. You, of course, sovereign in this matter, and you could decide to take no action whatsoever, wait for perhaps the next NJC settlement, and on you go. That's in your gift. That's, I think, apart from the final slide, it might say any questions. That's us.
Anybody got any questions? Yeah.
Full-time equivalent. Because the figures that we've got in here, 33% of the total number of staff you've got aren't full-time. So how do you work out when you say full-time equivalent? I don't know.
Well, that's the data capture.
So it's just staff that.
It was just how many. That gives us a good idea of the scale of command. If, for example, your chief fire officer has a cadre of 1,500 folk, and then you see another fire and rescue service where the cadre might be at 800, it gives you a sense of the difference in scale of command, because you are comparing full-time equivalent with full-time equivalent, and not just warm bodies where there may be a large number of part-time, for example, that could boost that number.
Liam? Yeah.
I don't agree with your statement, but I accept your answer. That's fine.
No, it's fine. I had no other data to work from.
Yeah.
In terms of how it might have broken down differently.
Yeah, thank you very much. When I looked at this, first of all, I could never understand, bearing in mind looking at all the employees, size, population and annual revenue budget, I could never understand how the chief fire officer is placed 21st out of the whole sort of the United Kingdom. I take your point when you say looking at putting maybe the 7th, but I would say that possibly we haven't looked at complexity of buildings and possibly a geography. When it comes to complexity of buildings, I would say there's a lot more complex buildings, possibly here, especially in Cardiff, as opposed to places like Scotland, West Yorkshire, and maybe Greater Manchester, because Manchester itself is a very small city. And bearing in mind Cleveland, where I would regard as a, no disrespect to people in Cleveland, but there is relations there, a very nondescript area. I would have put the chief officer maybe 3rd or 4th in the tier.
It's a question of the extent of the data that was available.
I always think, very high, I can remember reading a book when I was studying for my RICS, how to line the statistics, and I always think, bear that in mind today. No disrespect to you, good
No,
sir.
I take no offence, and you're quite right. We are working with the statistics we have, or at least with the data we have. If you want to, sorry, I was going to say, if you want to engage on things like complexity or other complexities that might compound or increase the job demand, all I would ask is that if I'm going to do something sensible with these numbers, I need to know what they are and what sort of metrics we might use in order to gauge them. Otherwise, I'd be guessing.
Bear in mind, I've been in cities like Glasgow, Edinburgh, and also in Aberdeen, and even the small city of Dundee. and compare that maybe with Wrexham.
My wife's from Aberdeen. You know, the granite city. I know that one well, and I was taken by my father-in-law down to Dundee to see Celtic versus Dundee, so I know a bit about that too. So
Dundee, nice place, but a terrible football team.
yeah, we can agree on that.
But I would say they're far more complex from my experience in Cardiff, in South Wales. And it's very diverse, going all the way right away up to Merthyr and all to Monmouthshire.
Yeah, I'm not opposed in any way, shape or form to considering factors extraneous to the ones that we've used here. My only point is I don't have it.
No.
I don't have those metrics. And all I would ask is if they were to be introduced, I would need to know how they're to be organised and run through the system. Otherwise, I'd be guessing, and I would.
It's good to know something you don't know, but I'm prepared to give a tour of Cardiff and compare it with the rest, which I'll be.
Steve, you want to come in?
Yeah, I got one. With the chief officers here, how do you know what their skill set is? Because at the end of the day, you may have a chief officer who's a fire chief officer.
Yeah.
Or you may have a chief officer who's an accountant. You know, so how can you work out, a pay base on that when the actual job role is completely different?
Well, it's a good point. Often when we approach jobs of this kind, we would offer the option of a job evaluation exercise in which we that's my bread and butter. I do that sort of thing week in, week out. We measure jobs. Here, that option wasn't available to us, but by virtue of how quickly this report needed to be completed. As I say, we weren't approached until just before Christmas last year. And to produce a report by early January didn't give us that facility. But yes, I take your point entirely.
Anyone have anything said? Ian, go on.
Sorry, can I ask who approached you to do it? Because it seems an awful short time scale because it's such an important thing. The comparisons that you've done is awesome. Did we approach you?
Yes, I was approached through a recommendation.
Yes, so from yes, yeah. Dan?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for work you've done. I do appreciate it was done in a very short notice period of time. Obviously, you mentioned how you came up with the metric of number 7, but even on the 4 metrics you look at, if you look at obviously population size, we'll be number 9. So I think there's even obviously on any metric it should go up. But I think there's even some debate on actually how on metrics you're given where we should be placed. Maybe 7 might potentially even be too high, particularly looking at population as responsibility of a number of people. A chief officer is responsible for people who obviously live in the area. We would be obviously 9th, not 7th.
Yeah, the weakest work demand metric was 9th. The strongest was 5th and then 7th. Our view was simply we aggregated to take, if you like, the running average of that rather than try and weight them separately and say, well, let's give a bit more weighting to this or the other. So whether you see that as a particularly crude method, I've no reason to believe, for example, that the population served versus the number of full-time equivalents and the scale of the budget. I've no strong feeling on that as to which metric might be more heavily weighted than the other. So it seemed to me perfectly acceptable to weight them equally. And then 5th, 7th, 9th gives you an aggregate of 7, no question.
Have you come across with other fire authorities where they haven't reviewed the chief officer's pay for such a long time?
I haven't.
Yeah, that's the good question for you then. With your report, what would you recommend to us as a fire authority? What percentages or whatever to us, or don't you do things like that?
Oh, do. Yeah, absolutely we do.
I don't agree with you, but I think as you are the expert on it, I've got a figure in my head.
Yes. I did some Questions on this too.
Bone rise?
To implement the finding in full, to move up to that 161,805 for the chief fire officer and a consequential